The training hall stretched before me like a monument to galactic superiority, its walls lined with weapons from 1,000 conquered worlds. I stood there, Commander Vex Thor of the Krillian Empire, watching the newest batch of recruits file in with all the enthusiasm of livestock heading to slaughter. And then I saw her. A human. A single, fragile human among the warriors of the galaxy. "You have got to be kidding me," I muttered, my mandibles clicking in disbelief. She was small, even by human standards, maybe 5.5 feet tall, with auburn hair pulled back in a practical braid and eyes the color of Earth's pathetic oceans. She carried herself with a quiet confidence that I found both amusing and insulting. Her name tag read Harper Vale. The other recruits towered over her. There was Gorthak, a Magron warrior whose biceps were thicker than her entire torso. Beside him stood Telrix, a Voxian, whose 4 arms could probably juggle this human like a toy. Even the smallest of the other recruits, a Quellan named Pixis, had natural armor plating that could deflect small arms fire. And here was Harper Vale, wrapped in nothing but soft skin and audacity. "Attention," I bellowed, my voice reverberating through the chamber. "Welcome to Phase 1 of Galactic military training. I am Commander Vex Thor, and for the next 6 cycles, I will be responsible for determining whether you are warriors or merely waste." I began my usual walk down the line, inspecting each recruit with the practiced eye of someone who had done this 300 times before. "You will be tested in strength, endurance, tactical thinking, and combat readiness. Most of you will fail. Some of you will quit. A rare few will actually prove worthy of serving in the Galactic Defense Forces." I stopped directly in front of Harper. She didn't flinch, didn't look away. Those blue eyes met mine with an expression that I couldn't quite read. The commander deserved either. "And then," I said, letting my voice drip with contempt, "we have whatever this island." A few snickers rippled through the ranks. "Tell me, Recruit Vale, did you take a wrong turn on your way to the diplomatic corps? Perhaps you thought this was a tour group?" "No, sir," she replied, her voice steady. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." I leaned down, bringing my face closer to hers. My breath probably smelled like the Krillian bloodworms I had eaten for breakfast, but she didn't even wrinkle her nose. "Really? Because, from where I'm standing, you look like someone's idea of a cosmic joke. Do you know what happened to the last human who tried to make it through my training program?" "No, sir." "Neither do I. He quit before I even learned his name. They discover space travel 5 minutes ago, and suddenly think they belong among real warriors." I walked back to the center of the hall, where my demonstration equipment waited. "Let me educate you all about humans, since we have one here to use as a reference. They evolved on a backwater planet with embarrassingly low gravity. They have no natural weapons, no armor, no venom, no telepathy, no ability to survive in anything other than the most narrow environmental conditions. They are, by every measurable standard, the weakest species to ever petition for GDF membership." Harper's expression hadn't changed. That was starting to irritate me. "They break easily, tire quickly, and die from the most ridiculous causes. Peanuts can kill them. Peanuts! They're allergic to their own planet. Some of them can't even drink milk after childhood without their digestive systems staging a rebellion." Gorthak guffawed at that. Even Telrix's mandibles twitched in amusement. "And yet," I continued, picking up a standard-issue plasma rifle, "Earth's military leaders seem to think their soldiers deserve to stand alongside actual warriors. So, here we are. Fortunately, we have a simple solution to this delusion." I set the rifle down and moved to the first testing station. The trial of strength, a basic evaluation that every recruit must pass before we waste time on advanced training. You will each approach this station and demonstrate your capability with the weapons provided. The minimum requirement is simple. Break the targeting crystal at 50 meters. I gestured to the far end of the hall, where a glowing crystal the size of a human fist floated in a containment field. You may use any weapon from the rack: plasma rifle, ion cannon, matter disruptor, whatever suits your biology. The crystal is designed to withstand standard atmospheric pressure and minor impacts. Only a properly delivered strike will shatter it. I smiled, knowing what came next. Of course, if you can't even draw the weapons, that tells me everything I need to know about your qualifications. The test wasn't just about accuracy. The weapons were heavy, designed for species with proper musculature. A Megron could handle them easily. A Voxian would manage. Even a Quellan could lift the rifles with some effort. Not a chance. Gorthak, you're first. The Megron stepped forward with the confidence of someone who could probably punch through the crystal without bothering with weapons. He selected an ion cannon, a massive thing that hummed with barely contained energy. He hefted it, like it weighed nothing, took approximately 2 seconds to aim, and fired. The crystal exploded in a shower of light. Acceptable, I said, making a note on my datapad. Telrix. The Voxian chose a plasma rifle, using 2 arms to steady it while the other 2 hung ready at his sides. His shot was more precise than Gorthak's, turning the replacement crystal into fine powder. One by one, the recruits demonstrated their capability. Some were better than others, but all of them managed to at least hit the target. Finally, only Harper remained. "Well, Recruit Vale," I said, savoring the moment. "Let's see what Earth's finest has to offer. Please, select your weapon." She walked to the rack, and I watched with growing satisfaction as she examined each option. The plasma rifle was too long for her arms. The ion cannon probably weighed more than she did. The matter disruptor required a grip strength that human hands simply didn't possess. But then, she walked past all of them, to the archaic weapons section. "Oh, this is perfect," I said, genuinely delighted. "The human wants to play with antiques. By all means, recruit. Choose your primitive tool." The archaic section held weapons from pre-spaceflight civilizations, blades, clubs, and other such nonsense that museums kept for historical context. There were a few ranged weapons, too. Projectile throwers from various worlds, energy weapons so old they belonged in scrap heaps, and bows. Several types of bows. Harper selected one. It was a compound bow from Earth, actually, one of the few human weapons in the collection. Probably donated by some nostalgic ambassador. "A bow," I said, barely containing my laughter. "Perfect. Absolutely perfect. Tell me, Recruit Vale, do you plan to defeat the enemy by boring them to death with historical reenactments?" She didn't respond. She was examining the bow with focused attention, testing the draw weight, checking the string. "That weapon is approximately 4,000 years obsolete by human standards," I continued. "And human standards are already the lowest in the galaxy. You do realize we're trying to prepare for actual combat? Against enemies with plasma shields and powered armor?" Harper selected an arrow from the quiver, a simple carbon fiber shaft with a metal tip. "The targeting crystal is 50 meters away," I reminded her. "That bow was designed for hunting small game at maybe 30 meters, maximum. Even if you could draw it properly, which I doubt, you'll never generate enough force to break reinforced crystal." She took her position, feet shoulder-width apart, body angled toward the target. "The other recruits used advanced weapons and still barely met the minimum requirement," I said. "You're attempting this with a weapon that wouldn't have been impressive when your ancestors were living in caves." She knocked the arrow. "Last chance to quit, Vale. Save yourself the embarrassment. I'll even write in my report that you showed wisdom in recognizing your limitations." She drew the string back. Her arms trembled slightly with the effort, muscles I didn't think humans possessed standing out against her skin. "Any second now, those weak little arms are going to give out," I said. "Probably drop the arrow right at your feet. Maybe injure yourself in the process. Then, We can all move on with our day. Her breathing slowed, steadied. The trembling stopped. Wait. She released. The arrow flew. Not in the slow arc I expected, but in a flat trajectory that seemed to violate what I knew about primitive projectile physics. It struck the crystal dead center. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a crack appeared. Then another. The crystal's internal structure couldn't handle the kinetic impact, concentrated in such a precise point. It shattered. Completely. The fragments scattered across the floor with a sound like wind chimes dying. Silence filled the hall. I stood there, mandibles hanging open in a way that was definitely not befitting a Krillian commander. My brain refused to process what had just happened. That was impossible. The bow was too weak. The human was too weak. The physics didn't support it. The arrow should have bounced off harmlessly, maybe scratched the surface, at best. Harper lowered the bow and turned to face me with that same unreadable expression. "Was that acceptable, sir?" she asked. I realized I was still staring. The other recruits were also frozen, their various faces and facial equivalents, showing the same shock I felt. That, I finally managed, was a malfunction. The crystal was obviously defective. "Sir?" Harper's eyebrow rose slightly. "Set up another crystal." I barked at my assistant, a nervous Pilthian named Rax. Immediately. Rax scrambled to comply, installing a fresh crystal in the containment field. This one glowed even brighter than the first, pulsing with energy that proved its integrity. "Again," I commanded. Harper knocked another arrow without hesitation. Same stance, same draw, same impossibly steady aim. Release. The second crystal exploded even more dramatically than the first. "Equipment failure," I insisted, though my voice had lost some of its certainty. "These crystals are old, probably degraded." "Rax, get the premium-grade crystals from storage, the ones we use for advanced testing." "But sir, those are rated for—" "Did I ask for your commentary? Get them." Rax rushed off. The recruits remained silent, but I could feel their attention shifting. The dynamic in the room had changed, and I didn't like it one bit. 5 minutes later, Rax returned with a crystal that cost more than most species made in a year. This one was military-grade, designed to withstand direct hits from actual combat weapons. We used them to test whether recruits could handle the recoil of heavy artillery. "There," I said, pointing to the containment field where Rax had installed the new crystal. "Let's see your primitive toy handle actual military equipment." Harper examined the crystal for a moment. I could have sworn I saw the corner of her mouth twitch, just slightly. She selected a different arrow this time, heavier, with a broader head. "You're wasting your time, Vale. That crystal could survive a direct meteor strike in vacuum. Your little stick and string won't even scratch it." She drew. Held. Released. The arrow struck true. The crystal held for exactly 2 seconds before hairline fractures spread from the impact point. Then, it simply came apart, splitting into 4 perfect pieces that fell to the floor with definitive thuds. My datapad slipped from my hands. "How?" I whispered. Harper calmly returned the bow to the rack, then walked back to her position in line as if nothing extraordinary had happened. "Sir," Gorthak rumbled, "what just occurred?" "Good question. What had just occurred? Humans were weak. Everyone knew humans were weak. It was documented. It was scientific fact. They had the lowest strength-to-body mass ratio of any spacefaring species. They couldn't even survive their own planet without constant environmental modification. And yet, this human had just accomplished something that should have required a plasma weapon at minimum. I picked up my datapad with hands that I refused to acknowledge were shaking. "Clearly," I said, forcing authority back into my voice, "Recruit Vale has some experience with archaic weapons. This means nothing. The trial of strength is merely the first test. We have many more." I looked at Harper, who stood at attention with that same maddeningly calm expression. "Don't think this changes anything, Vale. One lucky shot with a primitive weapon doesn't make you a warrior. Wait until we get to real challenges. Wait until we test your endurance, your pain tolerance, your ability to function under actual combat stress. Yes, sir, she replied simply. The rest of you, dismissed for evening meal. Report to Combat Training Hall 7 at 0600 tomorrow. We'll see how you handle close-quarters battle. The recruits filed out, most of them casting glances at Harper as they went. Some looked curious, others looked worried. I waited until they were gone before turning to Rax. Pull Harper Vale's recruitment file, I ordered. I want to know everything about this human. Where she trained, what her specialization is, why Earth thought she was qualified for this program. Yes, Commander. Rax hesitated. Sir, about what? It happened. The crystals weren't defective. I checked them myself this morning, and the military-grade crystal was brand new. I'm aware of that, Rax. Then how did she? I don't know, I snapped. Then, more quietly, I don't know, but I'm going to find out. Humans don't do that. They can't do that. There has to be an explanation. Rax nodded and scurried away to access the files. I stood alone in the training hall, looking at the scattered fragments of 3 impossible broken crystals. Somewhere in the back of my mind, a small voice suggested that perhaps I had underestimated this human. I told that voice to shut up. This was a fluke, an anomaly. By this time tomorrow, Harper Vale would wash out like every other human who had attempted military training. She'd fail the endurance runs, collapse during the strength conditioning, or break during the psychological evaluations. Humans always did. I had 300 training cycles of evidence to prove it. 1 broken crystal, or even 3, didn't change facts. Did it? The next morning arrived with all the subtlety of a plasma grenade to the face. I had spent most of the night reviewing Harper Vale's file, and what I found only deepened my confusion. She was nobody special. Born on Earth, standard education, passed basic military fitness requirements with acceptable but not exceptional scores. No genetic modifications, no cybernetic enhancements, no hidden advantages. Just another human who somehow convinced her superiors she belonged among the stars. The file explained nothing about yesterday's performance. I arrived at Combat Training Hall 7 early, setting up the day's challenges with perhaps more aggression than necessary. Today would be different. Today I would expose this human's limitations. The recruits filed in precisely at 0600 hours. Harper entered with the others, looking no different than before. Same practical braid, same calm expression, same inadequate human frame. Good morning, recruits, I announced, pacing before them. Yesterday was purely introductory. Today we begin actual combat assessment. You will engage in hand-to-hand combat scenarios, navigate obstacle courses designed for your respective species, and demonstrate tactical decision-making under pressure. I stopped in front of Harper. Some of you may have gotten lucky with weapons testing. Combat is different. Combat reveals true capability. There's nowhere to hide when someone is actively trying to break you. She met my gaze without flinching. Still that unreadable look. Gorthak? Telrix? You're up first. Standard sparring rules. First to 3 touches wins. The 2 giants moved to the combat circle. What followed was exactly what I expected. A brutal display of strength and technique that would have hospitalized most humans just from watching. Gorthak won, barely, landing his 3rd touch, after Telrix caught him with 2 devastating strikes. Acceptable, I noted. Pixis, Gendara, you're next. I cycled through the recruits, pairing them by approximate size and capability. Each match told me what I needed to know about their training, reflexes, and mental fortitude. Finally, only Harper remained unpaired. Well, Recruit Vale, it seems we have an odd number today. Unfortunate. I pretended to consider my options. I suppose you could sit this one out. I'd prefer not to, sir, she said. Really? The problem is finding an appropriate opponent. Everyone here would break you accidentally. I'm willing to take that risk, sir. Her confidence was beginning to seriously irritate me. Fine. Rax, get in here. My assistant appeared from the observation room, looking concerned. Sir? You're going to spar with Recruit Vale. Don't worry, I'll make sure medical is standing by. Rax was Pilthian, smaller than most species, but still significantly larger than Harper. He had decent training and enough experience to pull his strikes before causing permanent damage. Probably. They took their positions in the combat circle. Rax looked apologetic. Harper looked focused. Begin. Rax moved first, a testing jab that Harper slipped easily. He tried a low kick. She stepped inside it, too close for the strike to have power. Then she moved. I blinked, and suddenly Rax was on the ground, gasping for air, with Harper standing over him in a neutral stance. What just happened? I demanded. She hit me, Rax wheezed. Sternum. Couldn't breathe. I saw that part. How did she hit you? You outweigh her by 40 kilograms. Harper helped Rax to his feet with surprising gentleness. Are you all right? Yes, just, wow, you're fast. Again, I ordered. And Rax, actually try this time. The second round lasted longer. Rax attacked with genuine intent, using his reach advantage and superior strength. Harper responded with movements that seemed to defy physics, redirecting his force, using his momentum against him, striking points on his body that made his limbs temporarily malfunction. Within 90 seconds, Rax was on the ground again. Explain, I said flatly. Harper straightened. Sir, the question assumes there's something unusual to explain. Don't play games with me, Vale. Humans don't move like that. With respect, Commander, how many humans have you actually trained? I opened my mouth, then closed it. The answer was 12, total, across 300 cycles, and none of them had lasted more than a week. That's irrelevant. Is it? She wasn't being insolent, just genuinely asking. Perhaps your sample size is insufficient for accurate conclusions. Several recruits made noises that might have been suppressed laughter. I glared at them until silence returned. Obstacle course, I announced. Everyone. Now. We moved to the exterior training ground, where I had set up a course that had broken the spirit of countless recruits. Walls to climb, barriers to vault, weight to carry, all while wearing standard combat gear that added 30 kilograms to your frame. This course is designed to simulate combat conditions, I explained. You will complete it while carrying full equipment load. Minimum acceptable time is 8 minutes. Optimal time is 5. The record is 3 minutes, 40 seconds, set by a Krillian assault specialist. I didn't mention that the Krillian had 4 legs and natural climbing claws. Gorthak, lead off! The Megron thundered through the course with impressive speed, his massive strength letting him simply power through obstacles that required technique from others. He finished in 6 minutes, 12 seconds. The others followed. Times varied, but everyone managed to complete the course within acceptable parameters. Then, Harper stepped up to the starting line. The combat gear looked ridiculous on her, clearly designed for larger frames. The helmet kept sliding down over her eyes. The pack hung awkwardly on her narrow shoulders. Ready, recruit? She adjusted her grip on the equipment. Ready, sir? She hit the first wall at speed, and I waited for her to struggle with the climb. Instead, she went up it, like gravity had personally offended her ancestors. Her technique was flawless, using legs more than arms, finding holds I didn't even know existed. Over the wall, through the crawl space, under the barbed barrier without snagging once. The weighted carry section should have stopped her. 50 kilograms of dead weight across 50 meters of rough terrain. Gorthak had managed it through pure strength. Telrix had used all 4 arms. Harper picked up the weight, settled it across her shoulders in a way that distributed the load, and moved. Not fast, but steady, mechanical, like nothing could make her stop. She crossed the finish line. I checked my timer. 5 minutes, 8 seconds. Better than optimal. Only 18 seconds slower than the record holder, who again had 4 legs and claws. Impossible, I said, for what felt like the 100th time since this human arrived. Harper set down the weight carefully, then straightened despite obvious exhaustion. Her face was flushed, breathing hard, but she wasn't collapsing, wasn't quitting. How? I asked, abandoning any pretense of professional distance. Your species has lower bone density, weaker fast-twitch muscle fibers, less efficient oxygen processing. You shouldn't be able to do this. Commander, she said between breaths, perhaps your data is incomplete. My data comes from the Galactic Species Database. It's been verified by thousands of researchers. Yes, sir. Data about human averages. Normal humans. Civilians. She took a drink from her canteen. I'm not normal. None of Earth's soldiers are. What does that mean? She considered her answer carefully. Sir, when you evaluated humans, what were you looking at? Our biology at rest? Our theoretical limitations based on evolutionary history? Of course. Standard assessment protocol. Right. You measured what we are. Her eyes held something now, not quite amusement, but close. You didn't account for what we choose to become. That's nonsense. Biology is biology. Is it? Tell me, Commander, what's the maximum weight a Krillian can lift? Approximately twice our body weight, depending on fitness level. And you accept that as your limit? It's physiology. We don't. She gestured to herself. Humans have been fighting our own biology for thousands of years. We live in environments that should kill us. We survive injuries that should be fatal. We push our bodies past every logical breaking point because we're too stubborn to accept limitations. I stared at her. You're saying you simply refuse to be weak? I'm saying we train differently. We condition differently. We prepare for war like our lives depend on it. Because they do. She smiled, and there was something fierce in it. You called us fragile. You're right. So, we built ourselves harder. You said we break easily. True. So, we learned to heal faster. Every weakness you identified, we turned into motivation. Gorthak spoke up. That sounds exhausting. It is, Harper agreed. Most humans couldn't do it. But the ones who can? We become something more than biology says we should be. I struggled to process this. So Earth sends only its absolute best? The top fraction of a percent? To train with aliens who think we're jokes? Yes, sir. They send people who have something to prove. The pieces started connecting in my mind. That's why the others failed. You didn't send soldiers. You sent a message. We sent soldiers, Harper corrected, but only after we knew what we were up against. The first humans you trained were explorers, scientists, diplomats trying to learn combat. Good people, but not warriors. She stood straighter. You made it clear humans weren't welcome in your military. So Earth's response was simple. Fine. Watch this. Silence fell over the training ground. The other recruits watched with new understanding. This wasn't just a human trying to pass training. This was a demonstration. The trial of strength. Yesterday, I said slowly, you've used bows before. Since I was 6 years old, Earth's military identified candidates early. We've been training our entire lives for this specific purpose, proving humans belong among the stars. That's insane. That's dedication beyond reason. Yes, sir. It's very human. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something I had missed before. The calluses on her hands, the way she stood, balanced and ready despite exhaustion, the quiet confidence that came from knowing exactly what she was capable of. This wasn't luck. This wasn't a fluke. This was the result of deliberate, almost fanatical preparation. All right, I said, making a decision that would probably haunt me. Everyone, listen carefully. I've been wrong. The recruits shifted in surprise. Commanders didn't admit mistakes. I evaluated Recruit Vale, and by extension all humans, based on incomplete information. I assumed biological limitations meant practical limitations. I was mistaken. I turned to Harper. You've proven that determination and training can overcome significant physical disadvantages. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me yet, because now I'm going to train you properly. No more holding back, no more assuming you'll break. I smiled, showing all my teeth. If you're as tough as you claim, prove it. Not in demonstrations. In actual training, every day, for the next 6 cycles. Harper's expression shifted to something that might have been excitement. Yes, sir. The rest of you, same applies. Whatever I thought about your capabilities, I'm resetting expectations. We're all going to work harder now. I paused. Dismissed for midday meal. Report back in 2 hours for tactical simulations. As the recruits dispersed, Harper remained. Something else? Recruit? Sir? Permission to speak freely? I nodded. You're not wrong about human biology. We are weaker, on average, more fragile, higher maintenance. She met my eyes. But we're also adaptable, persistent. We've survived ice ages and plagues and our own stupidity. We've thrived in every environment our planet offered, and several it didn't. So when we reached the stars and found out we were bottom tier physically? She shrugged. We did what we always do. We adapted by becoming weapons yourselves, by becoming what we needed to be. She started to leave, then stopped. Commander, thank you for the opportunity to prove it. After she left, I stood alone in the training ground, contemplating the implications. Earth hadn't sent their best, despite being considered weak. They had sent their best because they were considered weak. Pressure there. I pulled up my datapad and began composing a message to Galactic Command. They needed to know that our assessment of humans required revision, not because humans were secretly strong, but because they had made themselves strong through sheer stubborn determination. 6 cycles later, Harper Vale graduated top of her class, not through luck, not through tricks, but through consistent, relentless competence. She outperformed species with natural advantages through superior technique and unbreakable will. The other recruits respected her. Several had asked to train with her, learning the human approach to overcoming limitations. I wrote in my final evaluation, Recruit Vale demonstrates that humans, while physically disadvantaged compared to other species, possess adaptability and determination that compensate for biological weaknesses. Recommend approval for active duty. Further recommend Earth be encouraged to send additional candidates of similar quality. On graduation day, I called her aside. You changed my mind about humans, I admitted. I thought you were the weakest link in galactic society. And now? Now I think you might be the most dangerous, because you don't just accept what you are. You decide what you'll become, and then you make it happen regardless of obstacles. Harper smiled. That's the most human thing I've ever heard, sir. She saluted, crisp and perfect, then joined her fellow graduates. I watched them go, this new generation of warriors, and felt something I hadn't expected. Pride. Not in being proven wrong, but in being part of the process that proved humans belonged among the stars after all. They were still weak, biologically speaking. They just refused to let that stop them. And honestly, that might be the most terrifying thing about them. The galaxy had no idea what was coming. But I did. And I almost felt sorry for our enemies. Almost.